All right, worked all day, heading now to go vote before I go home. I just wanted to talk a little bit probably by the time this is posted, I'll have already voted. Talk about this concept of voting. Oh, it's dark, you can't see me, which is probably for the best. For a few years, I would do what we call what's it called? A spirituality group in one of the institutions where I work, and we were given a guide on how to conduct a spirituality group. And there it said that New York State defines spirituality for a spirituality group as whatever makes your life meaningful. It's the lowest common denominator that could include everything. I was discussing this today with someone in another institution where I work. Just incidentally, we were talking about, he runs, he's the addiction specialist in the institution, so he runs AA programs, and he said that they got in trouble for pushing AA because it's pushing religion, pushing God. And I said, I of course believe in God, but if you want to talk to an atheist about a higher power, you could say society, you could say, I don't want to say necessarily government, or he said your parole officer, but certainly this concept of society, which might be represented by the government unless you're parole officer, in his language, is a higher power than yourself that you have to answer to. But even outside of that, there can be a concept of spirituality, but it's not necessarily linked to anything supernatural. Now, we were discussing this back and forth. Obviously, again, I'm a religious person, and most of patients who I was treating were religious people, and some were not. One guy said, well, my religion is rock and roll. And I was like, that's true in a certain sense. That, engagement with the arts is a spiritual pursuit. I would word it like this, that obviously religion is spiritual, meditation is spiritual, even philosophy. These are obviously spiritual pursuits, but then there are things that are less obviously spiritual that are connected to those, particularly arts, which are used in spiritual context, whether it's, the physical media of painting or film. Music, of course, is used in most religions. And as are art's used in many religions as a form of inspiration. But even outside of a religious context, at one point in history, most art, including both painting and music, were religious, and many people, assume that this was just, an excuse to paint, because the church ran everything, that type of thing. Or an excuse to make music, and so forth. Whereas their main interest was the painting or the music. But with that still being said, these artistic expressions are expressions of raw spirituality. Even if the person isn't particularly religious, there's something there that speaks to them spiritually. But then we get to things that are much more mundane, but are still intensely spiritual because they give meaning to our lives. Things like science, mathematics, history, social studies, and so forth. Not to put down animals necessarily, but the fact of the matter is, a Cocker Spaniel dog or a Dalmatian dog doesn't look back at the first dog of their breed to get the AKC, certificate the way we look at George Washington or Abraham Lincoln or other great people in history, the history of all different types of things. And so therefore, this study of history is an intensely spiritual pursuit. Animals don't really think about mathematics the way we do, even though they certainly do have mathematics in their lives. But is it a conscious pursuit the way that human beings have it? And there certainly are differences between animal spirituality and human spirituality. And with that being said, one of these manifestations of spirituality is the voting process that we have in America, and as inspired by America and many other countries, which again, America was inspired by earlier countries as well, but still, the concept of going out to vote is an intensely spiritual concept. Of course, people who are fundamentally religious will tend to vote in a way that's informed by their religion. People who are who have other expressions of spirituality, again, generally their vote is an expression of this spirituality. I was watching something on YouTube from CBN, Christian Broadcasting Network, was talking about combining voting with prayer. I've seen other people from more liberal expressions of spirituality. They say, look, we're casting a vote. Isn't that similar to perhaps casting a spell? That type of terminology. Whereas others, perhaps particularly Christianity, would see it as like something along the lines of casting a fishing line, as the fisherman is a symbol that appears in Christian traditions. And of course, in our own Jewish traditions, the concept of voting, we find it already mentioned in ancient sources. And it's a matter of dispute in Israel. A lot of people in the ultra-Orthodox world, there's this big question, do you vote or don't you vote? Because there are many people who feel that by casting that vote, they're partnering with the government and recognizing the government, and therefore they're responsible for all the evil that the government does. And even if the government does some good things, they don't want to have a partnership in the sins. On the other hand, other people will say that it's a religious duty to vote, even if it's a matter of lesser of two evils, or it's a matter of damage control. And so the old Vizhnitzer Rebbe, the Merchaim, when he went to vote, the Hasidim who would accompany him, he would instruct them to sing a Hasidic tune, a nigun, Lasos Nachas Ruach. And even though I'm not an Israeli, and it doesn't really matter to me what goes on there so much, it's none of my business. I probably would be from the camp that would not go to vote in Israel, but in America, I share that sentiment of Lasos Nachas Ruach, and perhaps even to say a brief L'Shem Yichud formula before casting a vote or being on the way to go to vote, because it is in a certain sense, I feel, a spiritual practice, even if it's not necessarily a religious duty. Almost hit a deer there, just missed it by that much. Baruch Hashem. And in a sense, perhaps, it is even, to engage in a civic duty is also a religious duty. In a certain, at least colloquial sense. Colloquially, we could call it a mitzvah to go and vote. And in many ways, it's a Kiddush Hashem to show that we are concerned with and involved in communal affairs, not just our own issues. I think it's really unfortunate in any matter when the Jewish communities focus on parochial Jewish concepts and interests at the ballot box to the exclusion of everything else. Of course, that should be part of what you're involved in, but we should also be concerned with the greater good, and in a certain sense, that includes the Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach. And so therefore, to be concerned with issues, what our Christian neighbors would say are biblical issues, biblical moral values. These things are connected in our tradition as well. We do believe that society as a whole benefits from morality, even though I've heard some rabbis suggest that it's none of our business. And it reminds me of Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks. They should both be well, even though Carl Reiner blocked me on Twitter. He should still be well. I wish him well. They had the 2,000-year-old man comedy sketch. Carl Reiner asks Mel Brooks playing the 2,000-year-old man, back in your day, did they have national anthems? And he said, well, it wasn't nations, we had caves, but yeah, each cave had an anthem, and our cave anthem was, they could let them all go to hell except Cave 76. And it seems like some people still have that in mind, and so they will vote for their own interest without focusing on the greater interest. But the fact of the matter is, and I mean that in subjects such as the redefinition of marriage, which we could say is probably a moot point at least for now. Could change in the future, most likely will not, unfortunately. But that should have been a state-to-state issue. That should not have been I'm not saying that, it should have been a national issue on either side. It should have been decided by each state individually. And really, an issue like that should have gone up to referendum and not have been decided by the legislature without consulting with the people directly. I would wager to say, as a religious Jew, that that's part of the reason why Sheldon Silver got into trouble, is because he made a tremendous Chilul Hashem supporting this. I mean, it's not right for someone who presents himself as an Orthodox Jew, wears a black hat, to support something like this. You could say, it's one thing to just say, I'm not expressing an opinion on this because I don't want to offend anyone. That I can understand, and it's certainly appropriate to oppose it if that's how you feel. But to openly support something like that, it's very troubling to me, and it's also very and it's, I'll be honest with you, it's troubling to me that our community is still supporting Governor Cuomo. I'm personally not. I'm voting for Mark Molinaro. I would have thought to vote for Larry Sharpe. He seems like a great candidate, but it also seems that Mark Molinaro might have a chance. So if there's a chance to get rid of Cuomo, let's do it. I understand on one hand that the community feels that they have to bet on the winner, whether they like him or not. But then there was one tzaddik who they asked him, one rebbe, one very holy, saintly man, who they asked him, how can you support such a dirty politician? I'll limit what was actually said, and he said, well, every politician is dirty. He actually said something else, but I'm not going to say what he said. But the fact of the matter is, I strongly disagree with that approach to say, let them all go to hell except Cave 76. As long as we are getting what we want, who cares about everyone else? My personal feeling is, if most of the things that a community like Curious Joel is asking for are freedoms that are positive for everyone. What we would actually call negative freedoms, but we call them negative freedoms because they negate the government's role and they give more power back to the people, and it's an affirmation of the basic American value of federalism. And really, federalism should exist throughout New York State, not just in this one town or village. We shouldn't be burdened down by regulations that don't speak to people in most of the geographical area of New York State. And Cuomo has been horrible about this. The SAFE Act has been one of the worst things, one of the worst attacks on the Second Amendment. And it does not reflect the interests or the ideology of most of the geographical area of New York State. It reflects the interests of the cities, and the cities should have the right, perhaps, to regulate what they want, although it doesn't make much sense to me either. The fact of the matter is making it harder to legally obtain a gun just means that all the guns are going to be in the hands of the criminals. And the criminals will be afraid to attack if they know law-abiding citizens might or might not have guns, but they're going to have no fear when they know that the law-abiding citizens don't have guns. I don't mean to politicize what happened in Pittsburgh, but there is quite a bit of stupidity to have a sign on a synagogue, no guns allowed. I don't know why anyone would even dream of doing that. And I'm not a big Zionist, I'm not a Jabotinsky, I'm not a Kahanist. I'm just talking common sense. It should be nobody's business if someone is or isn't carrying a concealed weapon, and it should be easy for a good law-abiding citizen to obtain a concealed weapon. And the truth of the right to bear arms is really not about self-defense, and it's really not about Pittsburgh, although that's certainly an aspect of that, meaning it's not just about, can you defend yourself? The real truth of the Second Amendment is, again, let's go back to, I'm not a person who likes to talk about the Holocaust so much and this and that. But the fact of the matter is the Nazis right away took away the guns because they wanted all the power. And that's why the Democrats want to take away all the guns, because they want all the power. I'm not saying necessarily the Democrats are going to put us in concentration camps. No, all Democrats have ever done is put people in internment camps. And that's, FDR was one of the least racist Democrats, and he was still a huge racist. People are upset now at Dinesh D'Souza for using the N-word when he was just simply quoting LBJ, who was so famous for signing a civil rights bill into law, but people ignore the many, many other civil rights bills that were only signed by Republicans. Democrats are not about civil rights. They're about putting people into groups, putting people into ghettos, and really enslaving people for votes, lynching babies in the womb. And really nothing has changed. So all that being said, I don't personally have a 501c3 that I represent. From a Torah perspective, it makes sense to support the Republican Party. People are going to ask, what's the Jewish view on abortion? And it's not so simple, I'll admit. My Zayda, the Chavas Yoris, Chosya Galenu, Al Kol Yisrael Amein, had a certain view about abortion. He still labeled it as a sin, just not as murder. And yet, people misinterpret what he says to say that it's okay. Well, it really depends on the situation. And again, so the Yavitz quoted the Heilige Zayda, the Chavas Yor, to discuss this question of certain rare circumstances that one might allow abortion. And he really spoke about it in a theoretical sense, not necessarily in a practical sense. Hopefully such cases are not practical, and he was discussing back and forth the issues there. However, all this being said, under the Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach, which most of the world call a parish Merubah parish, there is an opinion in the Gemara that seems to be the halacha that abortion is actually murder for a non-Jew, and for a Jew it's still a sin, just a different type of sin. Except in the case of where the mother's life is in danger. It would seem that even in the case of the mother's life being in danger, it might still be prohibited under the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, but permitted or mandated for a Jew. But the truth in that being is the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach are there are different opinions of exactly what the halachas are there. So it's not so simple. But this being said, still, we see clearly the Zohar says that our prayers are not answered on account of the sin of abortion. And that throughout, despite all of the horrors that the Hebrews experienced in Egyptian slavery, and they, it would seem, would have every right to say, I don't want to raise a child into this type of society, born into slavery. Why should I do it? And yet, they were praised for having so many children, an abundance of children. To go in a few generations from 70 individuals to 600,000, that's why it's mathematically incredible. It, in a way, requires each mother to have at least 30 children, probably. Or at least every father to have 30 to 50 or 60 or whatever. And the Medrash seems to indicate that that's what happened. Historically, that women would have sextuplets constantly a few times. That's an interpretation of Kichayos Heina, that they're like animals. They have a big litter. They have a lot of children. But again, all this being said, we see they would have had, in our society, they would have said, why do you want to raise a child into this type of society? And their answer was, we have hope for the future, for a brighter future, that our lives will indeed be better, and their lives will be better. And so we don't give up hope. In a certain sense, we could say that's what the Zohar is saying, that the sin of abortion is a reason why our prayers go unanswered. Could be that in order for your prayers to be answered, you have to have hope that they'll be answered. To do such a thing as not give an innocent baby a chance to live, even when things seem hopeless, is a demonstration of hopelessness. And so therefore, in order for us to expect our prayers to be answered, we have to expect our prayers to be answered. We have to look forward to a brighter future. We have to expect the best, hope for the best. We have to recognize that God can do anything. And so therefore, that is why we pray, because we give all of our hope over to our God, to our Creator, to the first cause, who is still causing everything to happen, even to this day. The rabbis ask in the Talmud, well, what purpose is there to pray if everything's already predetermined and predestined, and at least, once a year, for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and so forth, and different opinions whether maybe we're not just judged once a year, maybe we're judged every day. The Satmar Rebbe has an interesting chiddush where he says that perhaps just like in the physical world, I could pray all that I want to get from work to my house, but if I don't get in my car and turn the key and make sure there's gas in the car and everything, most of the time I'm not going to get there, just sitting there and waiting. Maybe a miracle could happen, I could do that, but in general, that's part of what's required, is that I have to get in the car. I still have to pray, because who knows, I could hit a deer, all kinds of things could happen. We hope for the best, that we will make it home in peace. We hope for the best, the Republicans will win. But we recognize that God is in charge. Sometimes we need reminders, like almost hitting a deer, right? really like to go to the mikveh now. I wonder if the mikveh is open here. I know some folks are probably up here to vote. Let's see what's going on here. Somebody's driving around here. I don't see a bunch of cars here though. Oh, got one bungalow. The lights are on. Alright, I don't need to go to Mikvah. I mean, I do, but I'm not going to. I gotta go vote. And so, when we recognize the meaning behind these things, I know a lot of my friends, they're like, well, what's the point in voting? Is my vote really going to count? The thing is, if everybody says that, it makes a difference. If you would have voted for one candidate, if you prefer one candidate over another, I mean, I guess you could totally disagree with me. I don't understand. I mean, things are so good right now, and why there are so many people who want to ruin it, particularly in the media. It's frightening to me. I mean, Republicans should just win in a landslide. Things are so great right now. And yet it's close. I don't know. We'll see. So, everything being said, we see from the Zohar, abortion is a no-no. It's again, Mishnah tells us, and that's the halacha, if it's a question of life or death, that's a different story. But other than that, we're not supposed to do that type of thing. So, and it is an expression of hopelessness, and the Jew is never supposed to lose hope. It's a big thing Rabbi Nachman taught. Again, halachically, you talk to a dayan, you figure out, what exactly, if it's a life or death situation. And I understand that life or death can include mental health. But it shouldn't be on demand. It should be with some thought put into it, So, and the thing is that Roe versus Wade, if it was reversed, would not mean that abortion would be illegal across the country. It would just mean that the states would decide. So, I'm up here. So, there's not even a sign here, vote today. So here I am at my voting station. I have to park more than 100 feet away because I have this Trump thing here, even though he's not running right now. I have a little sticker in support of President Trump. Not a sticker, a card. Can I park over here? This is here. This is a parking spot. I'm not just making up one. All right. Well, thank you for listening. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe. And comment. And if you didn't vote yet, go out and vote. Thank you, and God bless. Can I upload this?